In today's lecture, we're going to be moving on to our new section dealing with game capture and translocation. Now, it's important to note that this section is largely covering in a visual format all of the information that is already in your textbook, Game Ranch Management. Right, so the first thing that needs to happen when you begin a capture operation for any wildlife is to plan your capture operation. And the things that you need to consider are the following. Not only the type, the species, but also the total number of animals that you're going to capture, because that has an implication or has implications for the equipment and the personnel that you're going to need. You also need to remember to take into consideration the physical condition of the animals, whether there are any that are sick. You need to take into consideration their age and sex so that you know what you're looking for and where to find them. The time of year, because that's very important. If it's too hot, animals can overheat. If it's too cold, they can go into hyperthermia. You also need to consider your methods, and we'll talk a little bit more about capture methods in a moment. How difficult is the terrain that you're working in? How thick is the bush? How much rocky terrain, and so on. Your vet that will come along during the capture operation, if it's required, will be the person responsible for digging in and measuring out the immobilization drugs if those are needed. You'll need to make sure that you have the right number of vehicles available. You need to make sure that any disease requirements or health requirements are taken care of. And this is often also the responsibility of the vet. Finally, it's also important to have the necessary permits available before conducting such an operation. And these include both import and export permits. Right, so capture stress. Well, what is this? Well, if animals run too fast during a capture operation, you can get something that is known as capture myopathy or capture stress manifesting within the animals. So animals should really, to avoid this, animals should really not be captured in difficult terrain, mountainous or rocky terrain. You should really only capture animals during the coolest part of the day. And the best time in South Africa to do this is between April and September, when none of the females should be pregnant or in poor condition. You should try very, very hard to make sure that the animals are not handled too much after they're captured. The animals that live together or are gregarious, so they like spending time with each other, should be captured together as one, not separated out. You should make sure that your vet uses tranquilizers to reduce the stress on the animal. Remember, these can calm the animal down significantly. The animals should be kept in confinement for as short a time as possible, because this is very important to make sure that they're not overly stressed. You should keep the aggressive animals separate from each other so that they don't fight. And then, importantly, you should try and avoid as much unnecessary noise and spectators during the process as far as possible. Right, so what sorts of common capture methods are out there for use on a game reserve? One of the most classic methods is to dart from a vehicle or from a blind or hide. And this is something that's quite commonly used, called free darting for many carnivore species, lions in particular. Although some carnivores are very difficult, very elusive, and so it might be better to actually use some form of box or cage trap when you're capturing them. Some smaller animals can be caught using game nets, so this you can actually rush the antelope and capture them, but this is obviously quite a stressful procedure. And then some others can be captured by nets as well, but this is a more difficult procedure and requires quite a lot of manpower. And certainly one of the most common techniques for capturing larger antelopes is something known as the plastic boma method. And you should watch the video that's on Moodle, which gives quite a nice visual representation of how this method works with chasing animals through into a temporary boma that's constructed and they're chased in using a helicopter. Also, using a helicopter can be the way that you capture animals, specifically the larger ones, mega herbivores, things like rhinos and elephants, sometimes buffalo too, and some of the larger animals require a helicopter to get close enough to them, and then you'll dart from the helicopter. These are some of the more common capture techniques. When it comes to moving animals, as you can see from these images over here, there's often a requirement, in almost all cases, a requirement for specialized equipment. This is a specialized winch that gets elephants onto the back of a truck. They're put into the back of the truck over here. This is a specialized elephant carrier, which has a very important lower wheelbase, essentially, so that the animals can be transported safely. When it comes to animals like giraffes, as in here in the top right, it's very important that those animals are transported in the right transport crates to avoid injury. Once they're transported, or during transportation, it's very important that they are kept tranquilized so that the animals are calm during that entire process, and they have enough space to move but not fall over too much, especially if you're doing that by road. Right, and then the final part of a capture operation is when the animals when they arrive at their new destination and they require a period of acclimatization. So they have to spend some time in a boma in order to get acclimated to that new area before they're sent through. Not all wildlife species require this, but certainly many of them do. Species like giraffe can sometimes be immediately released, but a lot of other species require a period of acclimatization and sometimes additional veterinary testing in the case of something like buffalo.